Hey folks, welcome to the channel, and in this case I want to talk about the exceptional story of Fernando Parrado. Nando Parrado from the movie The Society of the Snow, based on the real tragedy of the Andes, where a rugby team ends up crashing in the mountains and they end up surviving there for over 70 days. Now, if you haven't watched the movie, I strongly recommend that you watch it because it is very good, and there's a lot to learn from that as well. But specifically regarding Nando Parrado, how this guy was able to overcome so much. And stay for the video because there's a couple of things that there's not mention of it in the movie, but it is super valuable as well. Nando Parrado is the kind of person that is a born survivalist. And there's basically three things that I recognize here that make for such a person. First of all, they no quit. They just don't quit. There's no quitting in their vocabulary or in their DNA. And it's not about how physically fit you are, how strong you are. It's just about will, the willpower, and it's maybe even about a stubbornness of keep on living when everything else says there's no point, we're not surviving this, you might as well just give up and die. Well, these kind of people, they just don't have that in them. They will continue walking, and he actually says that to Canesa when they end up walking for like 10 days out of the Andes. He says, okay, we'll die, but we'll die walking, okay? We'll keep on putting one foot in front of the other until we drop dead, but we won't stop on our own will. This is key, of course. This is a basic principle element of the survival mindset. But there's also something else, which is having the intelligence to acquire knowledge that may be useful in the future. Stay for the video again, because you actually will see how that was applied in a way that is not mentioned in either of the movies that you probably saw. That's what you're doing here right now. That's what you're doing when you're watching a channel about survival and preparedness. You, by the way, have my books, Surviving the Economic Collapse and Street Survival Skills, over there. They are available in Amazon if you want to learn even more. But that's one of the things that people like Nando Parrado will do. They will learn. They're intelligent people that will acquire knowledge, little bits of information that eventually may end up saving their lives or just helping them in one way or the other. And finally, the point number 3, I think, is the character, the remaining cool in moments of extreme high stress. When everyone is panicking, when everyone is going nuts, people like Nando Parrado will keep chill to a level greater than most people around them. This is a very specific case because these were, as you know, rugby players. As you may not know, these were upper middle class kind of people, more of the wealthy society of Uruguay. These were all college students, but beyond that, they were somewhat well educated from an upper class of people, but at the same time, not the typical spoiled people that you may have in mind, mostly because of the kind of sport they played. Rugby is a tough sport, and I can tell you that rugby in South America, it's not for the weak, it's not for the faint of heart, it's not, you have to be of a certain personality. In South America, there's a lot of football, what you people call soccer, which is, it's almost unforgivable, but well, it doesn't matter. Football is different. Football is usually what poor people in South America play. It is extremely rugged, very different from your soccer, but it's what the poorest of the poor play. Why? Because it pays the best. If you're good kicking that ball, you have a nice chance of making millions. You will not make millions playing rugby. I mean, at least not in South America you won't. And I guess that some are better than others and they end up playing abroad in this globalized world. And yes, that happens. But football is what poor people play. Rugby is what wealthy people play in South America. But it's a tough sport. You get hurt. And you're not wearing any pads. You're going full contact. I've seen videos of people that look at American football, NFL, and they think, oh, we go harder because since we're wearing pads, there's more contact. No, you just go as hard as you can and hit as hard as you can. You just do it without pads. There's no reducing or going half-assed in rugby in anything, neither running or tackling or crashing or anything you do. That is not what rugby is. So this combination makes for a very specific group of people, guys that are very tough, resilient, and there's no bitching, there's no complaining, there's just going through. Now, Fernando Parrado was not the captain of the team. That was some other guy. And he took that role for a long time. He was leading the group of survivors. Fernando Parrado was doing his own thing. First of all, he was lucky enough to survive, right? That is something out of your control. If you die or not in a plane crash, man, you can sit in certain parts that have, usually the more forward you are, the more likely you are to survive, which did hold true in this case. Those that were sitting a little bit more ahead of the plane had a better chance of surviving. The tail is the one that broke off. So look at how even that little bit of information may make a difference. It's also the case that a lot of people that were in the front had their legs broken when all of the seats folded on one or the other. They just smashed together many people. So you were better maybe kind of like in the forward middle of the seats. But that's something that, you have very little control of. He survived that with a broken skull. His skull was broken and he was in a coma, unconscious for 3 days. His mother that was in the plane died in the crash. His sister that was also in the plane died a few days later when he woke from the coma. So you have a guy with a broken skull, just lost his mother and his sister, and he's stranded in the middle of the Andes, probably the worst place on the planet where you can be. I mean, you cannot get more grim than that, okay? And still, the guy had that in him. He wanted to start exercising, working out, get better, and just walk out of there. That was in his mind, okay? But not only did he survive the plane crash, he also had something different from what the other survivors had. Listen to this.
You were obviously all starving on the mountains. What did that feel like with the starvation and the intense cold?
El hambre es diferente. Acá el hambre que tenemos ahora de ir a almorzar o de ir a comer es un hambre diferente cuando pasan varios días que lo único que sentís es un dolor en el estómago y sabés que si no comés te morís. O sea, es una cosa más razonada. Ya perdés esa sensación de ganas de comer un sándwich. Es horrible el dolor de estómago de no comer absolutamente nada y es cuando te das cuenta de que empieza a surgir en todos al mismo tiempo esa idea. Y empieza a surgir en todos sin que nadie hablara con ellos.
It is very interesting. He's describing starvation, when you're starving to death. Now, if you've ever done fasting, maybe skipped a meal, I recommend you do that every once in a while. Maybe go a day without eating. I recommend you do that too. But I also recommend that you go 3, 4, maybe even 5 days without eating. It is strange. It is not what you would expect. I was talking with someone, I was talking with someone on the phone the other day, someone that was preparing some material regarding survival based on, anyway, something, someone working on material regarding this kind of a survival scenario, right? And she thought that you would die, that you would starve to death after 7 days of not eating. No, you don't starve to death after 7 days of not eating. You will, though, have an extremely different experience if you are starving to death compared to just fasting. Fasting is different. In both cases, you're not eating. But what he says, and maybe he didn't mention this specifically, he's talking about how the pain of not having food basically drives you nuts. But that's specifically because he's starving to death. He's not fasting. The difference between fasting and starvation is that when you're fasting, it is out of your own free will. You know And again, if you haven't done this, I recommend you do it. If you fast for 3, 4, 5 days, the first day you're hungry. Second and third days, you're not hungry anymore. You're not hungry anymore. And as days go by, you start thinking more of food, but you're not going through the same traumatic experience because you know that at any moment you can go and eat out of your fridge. Now, when you're in the middle of the Andes and you know there's no fridge nearby, there's no food, and the only thing you're looking forward to is more starvation the days to come, and you will die of starvation, it is torture. And I mean that. Torture. People have been tortured this way. That is a key difference between something you're doing willingly and something you're doing unwillingly, something that's been forced upon you, either by someone else or by the circumstances that you find yourself in. That's torture. And it also applies to something like cold exposure. And it is so unfortunate. I saw the other day, just a couple of days ago, a government official of Israel, an Israeli government official, joking that the people that they have in camps, the Palestinians, that the pictures were leaked of them being stripped naked. He was joking about, oh, that's good for their immune system. No, that's torture. If you do something like that to someone against his will, that's torture. And even though you may think, oh, but I can do something willingly and I do something unwillingly, your body reacts in a completely different manner. The stress that you're exposed to when you're being tortured, it is completely different from when you do something out of your own free will. I go 4 days without eating, you're feeling fucking amazing. You're focused like never before. You have an ability to work and get things done and concentrate in a way you have never seen before in your life. You have never experienced that. I don't know, maybe drugs or something like that. But you will never be as focused as you are when you've been 3 days fasting, 3 or 4 days fasting. That same thing in the middle of the Andes, that is torture, and that will drive you nuts. You will only start thinking about eating anything, whatever you can. These guys ate their shoelaces, they try to eat their leather belts, they try to eat the seats. The last thing they ended up eating was their own, the bodies. But here's where the survival instinct makes a difference between one guy and the other.
Yo el primer comentario se lo siento a Nando Parrado cuando le digo no queda nada en la despensa, que era donde guardábamos esa lata de mariscos, y me dice, Carlitos, yo me como al piloto, que además...
Nando Parrado was the first one that said, I'll eat the pilot. I will survive. I'll eat that guy. Others were thinking it. No one had the guts to say it out loud. But that's just what I'm explaining here. That's being different. That's being the natural survivalist in you. Yeah, that's what I have to do. I have to eat that guy because if not, I will starve to death. The other guys were thinking it, but they just couldn't bring themselves to say it. And there was one man there, one young man, that out of his beliefs, out of something in him, he just couldn't bring himself to eat human flesh. And he's the one that died. 60 days after the crash, he died of starvation because he just could not bring himself to eat other flesh. The other ones did, because that's the natural thing. The natural instinct is, yeah, I'll eat anything to survive. After a month of starvation, again, big difference between willing and unwilling. You can go maybe for a month of fasting. It's a bit extreme, but people do that. It is not the same thing when you're starving to death, freezing your ass in the middle of the Andes. That is driving you insane. And man, that is for another entire video. But you start, there's a group mechanic there ongoing, but there's a first guy, there's one guy there that says first, I'll do it. I'll eat someone else to survive. That's Nando Parrado. Then you have, of course, the story that you probably know and what you saw in the film. And again, you have to watch Society of the Snow. It is fantastic. Nando Parrado is the one that, along with Canessa, he starts walking and he gets them out of there. In fact, they went for another excursion to the east, to the Argentine side. And when one of his friends collapsed on the snow and said, "Leave me here, I just cannot go anymore," Nando Parrado is the one that grabs him from the collar, picks him up and says, "You cannot give up. You will not give up. You will keep on walking." There's one guy that says, "I quit. I'm just too cold, too tired. There's no hope. I just lay here and die because I physically cannot go anymore." But of course, the first quit is mental. Nando Parrado being next to him, he cannot physically carry him. That is impossible. That is the fantasy of Hollywood movies. But he passes on to his pal the idea that there's no quitting. There's no quitting here. You will keep on putting a foot in front of the other until you drop dead, but you will not quit. And that's what gets this guy to camp again. If he had been on his own, he would have quit and he would have frozen and died right there. The difference in mentality, the difference in attitude. But there's one more thing, what I said, which is the intelligence, the gathering of information, the being calm in moments of crisis. Because Fernando Parrado didn't just survive the plane crash or walk out of there, he also survived the avalanche. And something that you haven't seen in the movie is this wonderful pearl of information. Check this out.
A tratar de sacar gente. Yo quise sacar a mis dos amigos. Los dos estaban muertos cuando llegué a ellos, Gustavo Nicolichi y Diego Storm. Tuve la oportunidad de poderlo sacar a Parrado de ahí, buscando a la única mujer que estaba viva hasta ese momento. Me encuentro con la cabeza de Nando Parrado. Que Nando Parrado había sobrevivido porque le vino a la cabeza un artículo de aquella revista Selecciones que decía que debajo de la nieve se puede respirar en la medida que se respire despacio, porque la nieve es porosa. Entonces se mantuvo respirando despacito hasta que llegó mi mano y lo rescató.
The guy is explaining that after the avalanche covered everything, it was only him and one of his friends that were above the snow. They thought they were the only two survivors left after the avalanche crashed into the wreck of the plane. He tried to get his two friends out first, and after that they tried to get the woman that was remaining in the plane, and he comes across the head of Nando Parrado, and he brings him out. And Nando Parrado managed to survive that long because he had read in an article that if you find yourself caught in an avalanche, what you should do is remain calm and start breathing slowly and try to make a little bit of room there. And as long as you try to remain calm and breathe in slowly, there's a great chance of you actually being successful at it and surviving for a longer time. Look at the mentality that this guy had, that after everything they had gone through, in the middle of the avalanche, buried under snow, he remembered the article. This is not in the movie, by the way. And this is something this guy knows, Carlos knows, because Fernando Parrado obviously told him. Nando Parrado told him that he had read in an article that if you remain calm, as difficult, as extremely difficult as it must be to not let panic get over you, breathe slowly, buried alive in snow. The guy does that, and because he does that, he survives yet again. It is amazing. It really is an exceptional person. And I was talking with my brother the other day. He works in because of his job, he has lots of these seminars and keynote speakers showing up, and he does this a lot. He gets lots of these things because of the company. He told me that he was in a lecture from Fernando Parrado, and it was by far the best one. The guy, he now does this. He travels all over doing these lectures, and my brother told me it is by far the best one I've ever had. The guy just transmits very well his mentality, his way of thinking, and it is impressive. It is amazing to hear him explain it. Guys, that's basically it. It is just the kind of thing that if you're watching this channel, that's what you're at least trying to do right now. And we are here to learn. And as always, you have the channel, you have my books. See you on the next video. Take care.